Dig it!
Ladies, gentlemen, friends, foes, lurkers, regulars, GMO people, organic people.
Boiler room. Inbound. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, welcome. This is Boiler Room, and we've got a special broadcast, sort of a unplanned pop-up broadcast going tonight here, coming out live out of Alternate Current Radio Studios right here in Central Texas. I'm your host. I'm Brian McLean. My call sign is Hesher here in the Boiler Room. And you know, I had a phone call the other day, and it came from my good friend, the Truth Hound, Mark Anderson. And we started talking about the weather. Pretty much, you know, normal, friendly call, right? But of course, this is the Truth Hound and Hesher you're talking about. So we can't just talk about the weather as though it's something that's just happening and has nothing to do with the media and has nothing to do with technology or any kind of, you know, weird psychological operations or anything like that, because that's what we enjoy talking about, because we're trying to make sense of what we're seeing here. And the thing that started this conversation, Mark calls me and he says, "Are you seeing all this stuff about wildfires in Texas?" And this is before we had any wildfires, right? And I was in the car with Spore and said, "Yeah, actually, we've both been seeing this." We watched a number of weather channels. One of our favorites is the Texas Storm Chasers with Baldy in Chief David Reimer, of course, who hosts that. And I noticed a couple weeks ago, before we had this crazy windstorm, that he all of a sudden was saying, you know, stuff that he was hearing about high wildfire potential here in Texas. So I've been here in Texas for, I guess this will be my 9th season here in Texas. And I've seen a lot of weather, but Mark has been in Texas a long time too. And Mark Anderson, the Truth Hound, joins us now. Mark, did I cover how we ended up on this call pretty much correctly? And I'll let you take it from there.
Yes, you did, Hesh. Good evening to everyone. And I was coming back from a music gig Friday night. This is Sunday, so 2 nights ago. And there was these typical digital signs over the highway. I was on the East-West Highway, Interstate 2, that connects Brownsville over to McAllen, Texas, in southernmost Texas. And the sign said, extreme wildfire risk. Right now, right in this area, it meant. And that was also on Highway 77 heading north, which goes up toward Harlingen and eventually up toward Corpus Christi. And I thought to myself at the moment, it was nighttime, but that all there was around there, a very highly developed, very densely populated area, the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, which consists of 4 counties, Cameron, Hidalgo, Starr, and Willacy. And 3 of those counties touch the Mexican border and the Rio Grande River, and 2 of those counties border the Gulf of the Gulf of Mexico, aka Gulf of America. So I thought to myself, well, that's interesting because there are no forests around here. You do have small groups of mesquite trees. Of course, mesquite is used for grilling the brisket and, you know, it burns very well. And yes, there's always been grass fires down here, but it's not a forested area in any way, shape, or form. It's palm trees. Palm trees, of course, contain a lot of water, enormous amounts, and they don't easily burn by any stretch of the imagination. As you know, they don't have branches. It's just a big shaft with palm fronds on the top and things like that. So I thought to myself initially, well, it's a concrete jungle. And trees are few and far between, any groupings of trees. A lot of farmland, a lot of land that's been developed into housing, and things like that, but not ultra dense housing necessarily. But the bottom line was at the time was there was really no discernible significant fuel that would fuel or make a wildfire go. South Texas is its own place. It's Tex-Mex. It's a bit like Mexico. It's subtropical in its climate, and it is not a forested area in any stretch. So I thought it was a little curious, and I called you because they said extreme wildfires, and that word wildfire, in my informed opinion, is a loaded word. For one thing, it signifies something very significant, very large, very fast moving, and very destructive. But it also has that ring of randomness, wild, as in surprising, unexpected, um, uh, untamed. You wouldn't have any inkling it's coming. It's just a wild thing. It's a random thing. Out of nowhere, you have these fires erupt, and you better be careful. It's an extreme wildfire warning, so everything around you may burn literally to a crisp, just like what happened in California. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And not 2 days later here, and we're seeing huge lists of contained, semi-contained, not sure if they're contained fires in and around Texas. And my question is, Texas has often had grass fire and fire problems, no doubt, but are we going to be the next California where you have extremely serious and deadly fires, which by all indications um, do not follow conventional fire patterns at all. They seem to go from place to place without any fuel material to get them from one place to another, and they seem to result in destruction that, rather than being the normal asymmetrical damage that fires cause, uneven, not real even and predictable patterns. Rather, the new modern wildfires 2.0, are very surgically and uniformly destructive. Every house will burn to the exact same degree, in the exact same way, with the exact amount of destruction and the exact same anomalies in California. Trees barely burned, if they're burned at all, some of them burning from the inside out. Plastic trash cans standing there untouched, even though they were supposedly next to, physically right up close to extreme heat. And so how can that be? If you leave a plastic container on a gas stove too close to the burner, it will become misshapen and melt, and then you'll smell the toxic fumes of the burning plastic. We all know this. And yet that doesn't happen in fires that are supposedly hot enough, conventional fires, quote unquote, to burn houses to a crisp, not just burn them and damage them where you have a wall still standing and it's kind of asymmetrical, and hey, the toilet's still there, the stove is still recognizable, though not workable anymore. I've seen a fire in my own house back in the 1970s, and so the question then becomes, without going too far out on a limb, without speculating too much, the question becomes, is Texas the next California? We have this perfect storm in ultra dry conditions. Right now, it's very, very dry down here. Every day there's a new coat of dust on my truck because it gets windy and the ground is not wet enough to dampen things down. So everything's becoming a dust bowl. But one other comment I'll add before we go back and forth on this, Brian, is that, okay, think of a flood. A flood is basically the opposite of a drought, right? A flood is too much water, and a drought is not nearly enough water, practically none, right? So let's say they believe there's going to be conditions for a flood. They'll say, well, get to higher ground. Don't be in real low altitudes. Get high enough above sea level. Evacuate. And they might say, well, the authorities are going to put sandbags in this area, and they're going to do this and that to try and keep the floodwaters at bay a little bit. But with a drought, we get wildfire warnings, which are vague, and they'll say, well, don't throw that lit cigarette in the ground. Make sure that cigarette's put out, and don't be cooking too much brisket. Besides being a contributor to global warming when you run that grill, you don't want to do that either. And hey, isn't global warming the reason we're having all these storms and fires and droughts and yada da da da? But it's all in the negative. Just don't do this and don't do that. And yet the drought is allowed to worsen. The drought is allowed to turn the ground to crisp. Right now, my yard, the grass doesn't even grow. It's so dry. And the leaves that I could rake have been laying there so long, they just turn to dust when I rake them. And imagine all the fields all around the Rio Grande Valley and beyond here in Texas that are just dry and that crisp. And this is allowed to happen. And it gets into water policy. It gets into a water treaty that South Texas has with Mexico. It gets into all sorts of gross mismanagement when it comes to water policy and when it comes to cloud seeding, a known technology for the better part of 100 years that is not being utilized to the very best of our knowledge to dampen known drought prone areas that we know are very, very uncomfortably dry, like right around here right now. And all that mitigation could be done, all that dampening of the ground before it reaches the combustible point, and it is not being done with known technology, off the shelf technology. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation routinely approves licensing for cloud seeding experiments, sometimes all told, all the different experiments by corporations and universities covering up to 30 million acres in the aggregate. Okay. So why is everything reactive? We get the sign over the highway when things are already a tinderbox. Why is nothing proactive done? A little bit of it is proactive done, although not enough when flooding is thought to be prevalent, thought to be coming. But when it comes to the opposite of flooding, drought, it can't be avoided. They intentionally let it turn into a tinderbox. I'm sorry, but you can tell me otherwise, and you're going to lose the argument. Okay, you're not going to win. That a lot of firemen probably know this, but the governors, the people that work in the different bureaucracies in Texas and whatnot, you can't tell me they don't know that it's getting way too dry. And look at what's happening. People evacuating their homes, and a lot could be done to mitigate, and it is not being done. And we have to really ask ourselves why these people are even in their positions of authority. What is the point?
Yeah. And you and I did a special, I don't even know how long ago now, where we looked at all of the different we look at all there's a lot of patents. We've talked many times about this actually. We've talked about all the patents that are associated with various forms of weather modification, as there are plenty of patents that one can discover. They're out there in the public. But you brought into the boiler room a couple years back the agreements, right? Like where I mean, I can't remember who it was. It was within the state government, and they were agreeing. Maybe you could remind me how that worked for anyone who's still, because you never know. We get people cruising through here that still don't believe that cloud seeding and weather modification are legitimate technologies.
I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to. What first comes to mind for me is right now, if you go to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration website, they'll explain to you that there's a $10,000 fine for weather modification without a license. So if you give them 10 grand, chances are you can do whatever the hell you want. If you're a corporation, a university, a black budget government agency, a above board government agency. But what's curious about it is out of the one side of their mouth, a NOAA or other government official will say any significant weather modification is impossible. That is just the blind forces of nature. But at the same time, the NOAA website lists 10 or maybe 12 ways you can modify the weather and says that for each of those ways, you need a license. Otherwise, you're fined 10 grand. So if you can't modify the weather, how can they fine you 10 grand for modifying it?
Yeah, good question. And why did they have to have a United Nations treaty agreement back in the early 70s also? And we can argue all the way. We don't need to recover all this ground. We can argue all the way back to Vietnam and Agent Orange and other deforestation, weather modification things that were used at
Mhm.
that point. Like there's a very rudimentary chemical low altitude version of this kind of thing, and you'd be
Mhm.
fooling yourself to think that in this day and age, with everything you see up in the sky and all the patents out there and all of the admissions in mainstream media. That's the other thing. There have been plenty of disclosures in mass media, in documentaries, in news reports. I mean, this the genie is out of the bottle right now as far as weather modification goes. The only question is how much of it is there actively going on at any one time, and all you really got to do is look up to see a whole bunch of it, but then know there's a whole bunch of invisible stuff going on too.
Right. The UN has the World Meteorological Organization, excuse me, World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, just like the WHO. And they have in their records a long list of past cloud seeding projects all around the world. And that goes back decades. And so you're right, Hash. It's not a question of if they can modify the weather. It's only a question of which of the existing technologies are being utilized and how often and where and for what reason.
Yeah, for what reason?
But
That's a big
the
one.
bigger question is to withhold something so simple. You mentioned Vietnam. When I went to the Red Pill Conference in 2016 in Arizona, I saw Patrick Henningsen there, by the way, at that time. And Jim Lee, who does has a couple great websites. I'll get those websites in a few minutes. Climateviewer.org, I believe, and climateviewer.com. I'll confirm those in a few minutes. But anyway, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was where the North Vietnamese would bring their equipment down to fight the American forces in Vietnam. And Operation Popeye was declassified. And Jim Lee shared that with the Red Pill Conference audience. And they would shoot flares up in the air, simple flares, probably silver iodide or similar things they can use for cloud seeding now. And it doused the Ho Chi Minh Trail so bad with mud, the rain was so heavy that the North couldn't get their supplies down anymore. And that's been declassified. You're going back to the 1960s right there, Operation Popeye. So tell me now, granted, now what you're going to hear as a retort is, okay, Vietnam is a very lush, tropical, hot, humid climate, plenty of moisture in the air, easy to cloud seed. That's what you're going to hear. Okay. But I don't know if you want to show it now, but we can show it in a few minutes. If not now, even Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, in the most arid
Well,
desert
hold on,
like.
hold on one sec there, Mark. Let me just throw this
Yes,
up there because
sure.
we're just talking about it. This is from history.state.gov. This document is openly available there. It's about weather modification in North Vietnam and Laos. Project Popeye out of Washington, 1967. So there you go. Just to bring a receipt for what we're talking about here.
There you go.
That's its
Yes.
own rabbit hole. Okay, so I just wanted to put that up there, Mark. Carry on.
I'm glad you did that. Thank you. And then you can take your time. But the next thing to note is what you're going to hear in reply is it's harder to cloud seed where there's very little moisture in the air and there's an extreme lack of humidity. But the Middle Eastern countries, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, are having sufficient luck and doing quite well in the most arid parts of the earth, creating rain. There we have that headline from Arab News. Saudi Arabia takes major strides in cloud seeding to combat water scarcity. Okay. Oh, there's a word we could use. Scarcity looks like scar city.
Yeah.
Our water scarcity is scarring our cities. Now, why do we have a water scarcity? Well, water, I mean, if you look at water biblically, it's very interesting. Regardless of that view, or maybe in addition to that view, water basically starts in the sky and hits the ground, and where the ground is porous, it leaches through the ground or permeates through the ground. That's a better word, and forms what are called underground bodies of water or aquifers. Okay. And the Ogallala Aquifer, which is underneath northern Texas and Nebraska and a few states in between, at one time was the size, get this, of 9 Lake Eries
Wow.
in volume. They think it's less than half of that now. Okay. Now, if you build a lot of urbanization and a lot of concrete jungles, you don't get the absorption into the ground. South Texas is overdeveloped. This used to be a agricultural powerhouse to easily rival California, but the banks got in here and loaned money to all these businesses and all these housing developers, some of whom build houses that were never occupied and just laid there and rotted away, by the way, built them on spec. But at any rate, they talk about how proud they are of developing the valley into a retail oasis, which has some perks, yes, here and there. Okay, it's not altogether bad, but the retail jobs are not the kind of jobs that are upward mobility. You're not going to raise a family working even 2 or 3 retail jobs, and you're lucky if you are, especially with housing prices. But the thing is that a lot of excellent farmland with all that permeable soil, all that porous soil was turned asunder. So we have these concrete jungles, endless highways and byways, parking lots, retail strips that sell Chinese junk to a large degree, although that's changed for the better a little. But the bottom line is that it makes the aquifers shrink. Okay. So you have that kind of banking policy to develop retail meccas where prime farmland once stood. Okay. It's a transformation that's not altogether a good thing. And besides the fact that a lot of the food is grown and shipped away and isn't even used to feed the local population, except for a little cabbage and onions and whatnot. Besides that, you have this huge transformation. Okay, so now I read in a recent newspaper, and I'm going to kind of go plank by plank here. There's a treaty with Mexico that Texas has, particularly the Rio Grande Valley area, the 4-county area of South Texas where I live that I just mentioned. The treaty stipulates that Mexico must deliver 1.7 million acre feet of water to the Rio Grande River and area over the course of a 5-year cycle. But as of November 2nd, 2024, a few months back, Mexico was more than 983,000 acre feet, or nearly 3 years in arrears in the water it's supposed to provide to Texas under a 1940s treaty. An acre foot is an acre of water 1 foot deep.
That sounds like a lot. What was the number again there behind?
An acre, 1 acre foot of water is an acre of water 1 foot deep.
Yeah.
There are 983,000 of those in arrears. In gallons, that is 320 billion gallons of water that Mexico is shorting the United States through Texas. 320 billion gallons in arrears.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and this article in the local McAllen Monitor, barely good enough for the toilet room, happened to have that article. It made that one section of paper worth keeping. Usually I use it for other functions like starting fires in my grill or something. But
Right.
At any rate, the headline is Update to Water Treaty with Mexico Deepens Local Mistrust. Well, the people that have been overseeing the compliance to the treaty never put any teeth in it, and the local farmers are complaining. A lot of people don't know South Texas used to be a boon for sugarcane, growing a lot of sugarcane. That industry is all but gone as we speak. After over 50 years, probably longer, maybe more like 70 years of this part of Texas being a fairly major grower of sugarcane due to water mismanagement and drought. And there's water mismanagement involved in drought, as we're outlining here. The sugarcane industry is terminal and is about to die as we speak in South Texas. Citrus, not just Florida, major South Texas citrus, 50% what it was. It's dying right now as we speak. 7,000 acres have been turned into dirt. Orchards have been turned over. 7,000 acres in recent times of citrus here.
Wow, that's insane, man. I mean, we saw similar decline in California, but not to that level, you know what I mean? California is always gonna have it's got it's always gonna have its things, like the almonds growing there is absolutely insane. That's a whole nother rabbit hole, when you get into how much water goes into all of the almonds that they grow in California. And then there's some really interesting arithmetic one can do to figure out how much of that almond actually stays in the United States at all. Spoiler, not much of it. So,
Right. I have a good friend in Canada named John Devine, a former, uh, kind of a former fish and wildlife type official there in Canada. He pointed out that in Arizona, and I believe California, but in Arizona near the California border, they use American groundwater to grow alfalfa to export the alfalfa to cows overseas. And there is no premium paid that we know of for the use of our water to grow alfalfa for cows and dairy operations in overseas, including I believe in China. I'd have to look that up, but overseas. So there's no premium. Nothing is apparently paid to offset the loss of our groundwater to help foreign countries. See, so it's another form of trade deficit. It's another form of unfair trade that I don't even think President Trump, with all his talk about tariffs, some of which make sense, I don't think he's aware of these subtleties, these issues that the average person never hears about. The average person never hears about cloud seeding. They never hear much, at least not consistently, about Mexico's failure to fulfill that treaty and the lack of teeth and the farmers complaining down here. Where's the teeth? Why is there no penalty for Mexico just completely dropping the ball? Okay. These officials that we put into office, appointed and elected, they have some very important duties, and the vast majority of them completely fail in their position. We live in a political age of almost complete and total abandonment and apostasy. They refuse to do their duty.
yeah. And then it's like a lot of these things are completely uh like compounded by, you know what I mean? Like you go from something that's arithmetic like this, like, you know, well, you make everything pavement and the ground won't absorb the water anymore. Okay. You close down all these farms and you build strip malls. It's going to change things around here. This country owes us all this water. They've promised to give us all this water. It's not going to get here. Then you start adding layers of variables and complexity, and it goes from easy, arithmetic to calculus real quick. Like in California, you got the local, environmental protection acts, and then you've got corporations like Nestle coming through and getting waivers to drain reservoirs, and then you've got the smelt fish huggers, and the turtle savers. And I love fish and turtles, don't get me wrong, but like they will make policies in California that put animals so much higher above people that the people would just maybe die if in the worst situation, right? I mean, look what just happened in California with this last set of fires and the way everything was mismanaged. And it's just like you've got so many layers of these things happening. It's like a house of cards coming down, and then you throw in the whole what is climate modification, what is cloud seeding, what are all these things, when are they happening, where are they happening, to what ends are they happening, what are they trying to make happen, is it for the benefit of the people, is it for the benefit of the land, is it for the benefit of some corporate CEO somewhere, is it for the benefit, you know what I mean, Mark? It's just like there's so many freaking factors frickin' frack here when you get into this. And I don't want to just shotgun it too bad here, where it's just like all something we can't suss out, because I think there's some real simple things in here that we're getting at. And one of the things that we're interested in here is there a psychological operation going on? Are we experiencing some sort of predictive programming when we see things like this? Because this is what came out. Spore got this on her phone right after we talked to you, and it came from a news app, and those always look funky. So I sourced it down to its original source. It came from alerts.weather.gov, National Weather Service alerts. And here it is. And this is one of the things, like, when you and I talked, we didn't even know that there was a term, right? A National Weather Service term called a red flag warning about wildfires here in Texas. That was news to me, at least. And here it is. It was issued yesterday. It was issued on the 15th at 2:03 CDT, Central Daylight Time. Red flag warning issued March 15, 2:03 until March just for that same day, right? From 2:03 to 9 p.m. Issued by NWS Fort Worth, Texas. So National Weather Service, Fort Worth, Texas. They say dangerous, all caps lock, dangerous fire weather conditions expected today. Affected area, western central Texas. They give you the timing, the winds. And on this day, winds are 20 to 25 miles per hour with gusts up to 35. A week and a half ago, we had winds that were going 60 miles with gusts up to 80 almost. Low humidity and really nice temperatures. Sorry, Pacific Northwest and West Coast friends, we got the nice weather for March, for the middle of March. And you got some cold weather out there. But anyway,
let me ask, do you mean that when the winds were higher and it was even warmer, there were no red flag warnings?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. As far as I know, I mean, I only became aware of this yesterday, right after we talked. So maybe, if I look through their archives, I actually assume that there is, because we watched the Texas Storm Chasers channel. Like I said, big shout out to David Reimer over there. It's a great channel, especially if you're in Texas or anywhere in the South. I highly recommend that channel. David is an amazing workhorse. But he, and I've been watching him for a long time, and I never heard him mention red flag warnings and high wildfire warnings. So, when Spore and I saw that a couple of weeks back before the really big windstorm, the first wind and dust storm we had, we noticed, like, oh, I've never heard him talk about wildfires before. I mean, he really kind of, like, you could tell he was affected. And I think it's probably because he reads sites like this, like National Weather Service, which, I don't read that site because I go to people like him and Joe Bastardi for my weather.
Yeah. Very, very interesting what you're showing there. Now, I like the way you broke it down. You start out with the basics, that we have known off-the-shelf technologies that even very arid, all desert countries like Saudi Arabia are using with pretty good success. You have other things like fog harvesting, which has been done in Monaco and different places, where fog, which is water vapor, through technology is condensed back to liquid and sent through pipes. So California, San Francisco, and Monterey are almost always enveloped in fog. That fog could be harvested and turned into water. Okay, these are known technologies, and no conspiracy need be cited, except to say, if the word conspiracy is too strong, I'll be forgiven, except to say that why aren't they being utilized to increase overall water supplies when conditions are good, when there's a relatively low risk of fires, in order to mitigate against those times when the risk of fire is greater? All of this needs to be proactive. If you have a purely reactive fire policy, oh, things are dry now, we're in a wildfire warning, look at the digital signs over the highways, don't do anything out of the ordinary with that smoldering cigarette, etc. Careful of those charcoal grills. If we get to that point, that's completely irresponsible. to simply look at it in a reactive way. I mean, who does that? I mean, really? That's the best we can do in the 21st century? And then we have these technologies that are simple and have been around a long time. Fog harvesting is probably newer than cloud seeding. All of it's in the UN's records. It's listed at NOAA and so on, the cloud seeding. And yet we can't try mitigating against fire conditions proactively, you're telling me? And now we have how many fires going on in Texas right now? I think you have a list that you could show.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Spor's sort of one of our background researchers on this particular broadcast. She's been coming up with a lot of support information for us. Let me share. Oh no, what happened there? Facebook wants to make me log in. Let's see if we can do this anyways. Did it work? Yes, there it is. So this is off of said Texas Storm Chasers Facebook page here. And it is Texas Fire Update. See if I can increase the size here so everybody can read it. And again, you can follow them at Texas Storm Chasers. But here's the incident information as of 12 hours ago. Wildfire update, March 16, 10 a.m. It says yesterday, Texas A&M Forest Service personnel responded to 11 new wildfires that burned 9,116 acres across the state. A big one was the crabapple fire. That was the first one that Spore sent me while we were live on Sunday Wire this morning. So we have the Cottonwood Creek fire, San Saba County, 633 acres, mostly contained, 95%. We got a rest area fire in Gray County, 7,900 acres. Windmill fire in Roberts County, 23,000 acres, 65% contained. That's a big one, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, 23,000, and just over halfway contained this morning. The Saddle Fire in Bandera County, 17 acres, 80% contained this morning. Duval Fire, let's see, that is Duval 1256, Duval County, 58 acres. That one was 75% contained. We had Lake Pasture Fire, Refugio County, 300 acres, 90% contained. That crabapple fire was the biggest, 8,640 acres as of this post this morning, at only 40% contained. And then there was the chicken strip fire. I don't know where Real County is, but they got the chicken strip fire there in Real County, 20 acres. That was halfway contained. And then there's a list just as long of wildfires that are 100% contained, and they were all much smaller, 8, 11, 15.
Here's the map of Refugio County, Texas.
Thanks, Siri. That's really nice of you to chime in here, AI. But yeah, we had a 57 acre in Conco Hill.
Let me mention, Brian, I just looked it up. Manhattan, New York, the borough of Manhattan is about 15,000 acres. So that 23,000 acre fire you listed is bigger than New York City proper.
Wow. Okay. Well, that puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, that puts things in a major perspective. That's like all of New York, basically twice of Manhattan burning.
Interesting.
And so, again, in the time that we live in and the knowledge that we have, progress is supposed to be measured in some way. And to measure the progress of society, we have to look at the ways we improve things for the better for everyone, not just for plutocrats, not just for billionaires. We also live in the age of the anointed billionaire, don't we? Oh, you're a billionaire. You must be brilliant. Yeah, you couldn't be some CIA front or just some lucky punk that stole somebody else's technology. No, you're a genius because you have a lot of money.
You got 14 kids with 14 baby mamas, you lucky dog. Oh, man, that is so respectable. Never mind all those conservatives who find that behavior immoral. You're awesome.
Yeah, but that a little bit of rant aside, the anointed billionaire, he knows everything, he knows all, sees all, hears all. He is the grand shaman, right?
And manufacturers blowtorches too, by the way, just for lulz.
Yeah, the Oracle. Funny how one of the companies is named Oracle, but anyway, all the king's horses and all the king's men can't seem to figure out how to not just put out fires better, but lessen and diminish the conditions for any large, damaging, or deadly fire to start in the first place. When that kind of negligence happens amid all this known off-the-shelf technology, it's not hard to reach the very worst of conclusions as to why that's so. Okay. Are you going to tell me that they just don't think of it, or are they going to rattle off that argument? And we could watch a video in a couple of minutes from some mass media cartel Nimrod, another one of these weathermen. Only they have the authority, only they know what's going on. We could watch that. But are we to believe that when they say, oh, it just can't be done, that we take their word for it? And I'll mention that if we do show this weatherman video, which I have a feeling we're going to, the weatherman, we can talk about it more afterwards, talks about cloud seeding during the fires and why that might be a problem. And that might be correct to an extent. But what I'm talking about is having foresight and looking at the National Weather Service, NOAA, and all these organizations that receive millions upon millions of our tax dollars. Is it really so hard to sit down and project? I mean, they can project 15, 20 days from now, we're going to have a sunny day. A dozen days from now or more, they can pretty much predict it's going to rain. So they pretty much can know that, oh my gosh, over the next 3 weeks, there's almost no rain, maybe even 4 weeks, right? So is it really so hard to say, let's get out some technology and let's douse that ground a little bit. Let's clean out some of that underbrush while we're at it. Let's mitigate against a possible major fire. Is that really so hard? And is it stupidity? Is it ignorance? Or is it something worse? I mean, come on.
Yeah. And also, while we're at it, why have those same mass media cartel Nimrods browbeaten, chastised, accused people of being conspiracy theorists, all these things? You've been made to feel like you're just a total social reject. You're not welcome in the conversation at all if you ask these questions. They've done this over and over and over again for years. And it's like, could you imagine the paradigm that Mark Anderson just laid out here for you if that was what managing weather and water tables and fire breakouts, if that was what it was like, if the technology was honestly presented to us, right? And the means of the technology honestly described to us, and the goals of the technology applied to us, and imagine the boon for the weather people, the meteorologists out there, if this was all open information and they could say, hey folks, looking pretty good this week, but it's going to get really dry next month. And NOAA in combination with Texas A&M are going to be out and they're going to be doing this, and this is what they're spraying up there, and this is how the effect is going to be, so you can kind of plan for a minor correction in this natural cycle here. And by the way, we're going to use some of your tax dollars and we're going to go out and we're going to clean up the underbrush, and the Secretary of State is going to go down there and have a meeting with these chumps in Mexico who aren't doing their part on the treaty. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of that what if we had real politique, right? What if we had just an honest portrayal of what was going on? But why don't we have that? And I think that gets into the sinister thing that Mark was just alluding to. We can't have that, right? Because then we can't have, let me just say, what do we have in its place? What do we have in its place? We've got a hysterical media who's constantly upping the game, coming up with new fear tactics. We've got unexplainable weather happening that many people think could have technology being applied to them. Lahaina, North Carolina, Pacific Palisades. We could go on and on and on, with some really strange stuff. But, we've covered these things as they happen. But what we do have is every year, Bill Gates has a plan to blot out the sun. Or, this corporation is doing experiments pouring, like manganese and all these, reflective materials into the sky. We're going to reflect the sun back, guys. We get an article saying China wants to make a fake moon. Wouldn't that be neat if we had a fake moon? You know what I mean? We get all this like stupid sci-fi stuff and this fear prawn stuff. And then our meteorologists are, barely barely keeping their jobs probably because it's all so stupid. That's what we get instead. Instead, we get psyops and hysteria and fear porn, and you just no honesty. And who benefits from that? Well, okay, who benefits from that is the World Economic Forum crowd, the UN crowd, the climate crisis people, the fake tree huggers, the people that make money on making electric everything. There's so many people, the people that want to do climate lockdowns, the people that want to make money on, carbon taxes and all this bullshit.
Exactly. The idea of a principled government and an honest media is almost anathema to the current society. Like, imagine, if I may say, I mean, I like to think that I have a few principles, a few scruples. Imagine if somebody just was at the helm that just told it straight and said, we know that the conditions are going to get really crispy here, and there's going to be a higher than normal risk of fires. So we're going to proactively act on this. And yes, we can modify the weather to a point. We can cloud seed and we can do this and that. But I think the reason they don't talk openly about cloud seeding, even though the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation has numerous applications for it, and other states do too, carried out by universities and corporations and so on. But I think, and I discovered it once going through West Texas in 2022 with my wife, and I picked up a local newspaper, and the required legal ad was published in that newspaper because one of the things that has to be done is the company that wants to do the cloud seeding is required by the Texas regulators to put some sort of public notice out there. So they published a public notice in a rather obscure newspaper, I believe called the Pioneer Press, out about halfway between Laredo and El Paso. And so that obscure paper, probably a weekly, not even a daily, satisfied the public disclosure requirement of the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation with regards to the applicant that wants to do the cloud seeding experiment.
There you go. You just described that broadcast that I was asking about earlier. That is exactly, we did a broadcast on exactly that situation.
I thought I might hit on it, and I'm glad I did. But the thing is that number one, that's a very low level of publicity to satisfy that rule. So in essence, the general population is not much aware, if aware at all, and they certainly don't think about it in terms of applicability, even if they are aware of cloud seeding. In other words, it's still secretive, you might say. And so, and I think the reason is because if they open up about that, people are going to automatically go, well, what else can you do proactively or reactively with regards to weather modification? Maybe these so-called chemtrails, maybe there is something to that. So instead, like you say, Brian, they clam up, they belittle and absolutely humiliate anyone and marginalize anyone that speaks up at a town hall meeting, trying to get a letter to the editor published, and so on and so forth, trying to make you look like an idiot, published half-baked Nimrod weather reports like the one I think we're going to watch in a minute. I know you'll certainly have the link in the show notes, and basically try and put up an informational blockade so the people are kept in the dark while large swaths of their state and their countries burn away, threatening life and limb, threatening sometimes the entire life's work of a family farmer, what family farmers there are left. As I mentioned, the citrus crop in Texas has been here forever. It's half of what it once was. Sugarcane is basically gone. As they put up their little concrete jungles funded by the bankers, one loan after another, one strip mall after another, for retail jobs that go nowhere, basically. And so, we're living in a state that it's built on lies. And I've said before, a lot of things can happen and civilizations will survive. But if you are literally built on lies, your civilization will fail.
Yeah, and like another, if we were having the sort of real politic honest style delivery of the situation here, another thing that we might know and or understand would be what are the side effects, what are the potential collateral damages to using these technologies, and have we seen these before? You know, not only that, but what are the potential weaponizations of these technologies, and have we seen these before? And if we have seen these before, how do we make sure that whoever set that up is held accountable and that this doesn't happen again? There's like a whole series of, um, like crimes against humanity wide ethics that need to be open kimono for the public if powers that be are going to be jacking around with our weather. But we know better than to expect that from them, because they've been actually jacking around with our health, jacking around with our food systems, jacking around with our medical systems, jacking around with our education systems in ways we won't even get into. Maybe too literal for my little metaphor here, but it's been, Mark, like, what happened? I want to know what happened in all these different places. If it was organic, even if it was organic, like let's look at Lahaina for a second. All that had to happen there for that to not have been like a horrible death trap uh, was to turn the power off. Why did power companies stop turning power off when enormous winds, more than 60 miles, 75 miles an hour, are coming through? What's up with that? Why is the brush not being cut? What's up with that? There's just all these very simple things that places used to do. And, of course, people will blame it on politicians. They'll say, oh, well, that's how leftists manage a place. And there may be something to that, but at the same time, it's like, well, are you forgiving the people on the right that allowed them to do that? Then, if you do look at it through that lens, then it's like you're just as bad as they are, or your guys are just as bad as their guys.
Yeah, there's an old saying, to whom much is given, much is expected. Okay. So if you're a criminal and you're an arsonist, that's bad. You're starting fires, you should go to jail. But if you're the authority that claims to be honest and you do nothing about the arsonist, you're essentially worse. To whom much is given, to whom much is entrusted, much is expected. Okay. You are duty bound to do something about that. It's not a choice. It's not an opinion. It's not a I feel like it or don't feel like it thing. Okay. The people that are managing the treaty with Mexico are duty bound to fill that deficit and do it now as much as humanly possible, whatever it might be. And you mentioned something that's very important. In Mexico, even the New York Times, to its credit, covered a community in Mexico where Coca-Cola sucked the aquifers practically dry, and the people drink more Coke than they do water, and diabetes and other high sugar related illnesses and health maladies are through the roof in that Mexican community. Coca-Cola drills enormous amounts of water out of the ground in Canada, enormous amounts of water out of the ground in India. The water bottlers in Evart, Michigan, built a plant that you have to see to believe. The diameter of the pipe that goes into the ground to suck those Michigan aquifers is enormous, and they get constant licensing increases to increase more water out of the ground. Last I knew, it was several hundred gallons a minute. And it ended up being like 20 billion gallons over the course of a year out of Evart. Don't take me on those numbers in this particular case. All the other numbers I've cited now are spot on. That one I'm a little unsure of, but the water bottlers the soft drink bottlers, and to some extent, we have to admit, beer bottlers. But the volume would be probably greater with Coca-Cola. Of course, Coca-Cola is a proprietary drink. People forget, this is a side note, but soda drinks, particularly those like Coke that are considered classic, long time Americana kind of drinks, are proprietary. You're not allowed to know altogether what's in there. It's a trade secret. So you're being fed a drink that the company is not required by law to totally tell you what's in them. Beer's not like that. Most drinks are not like that, but Coca-Cola and some of them have protected recipes, and you literally don't know what you're drinking.
And how many other beverages does Coca-Cola own? I mean, it's not just
Right.
Coke.
Yeah.
It's like Dasani water, and there's this giant cascading like umbrella liquid products that come from the Coca-Cola Corporation. And I don't even remember which one's above them or if they're at the top of that snake, but I mean, it's a lot. And the same with Nestle, Nestle in California has been completely just lecherous. They have just barnacled themselves onto the state and are just sucking water out of there. And for what? They're taking water out of your aquifers and out of your reservoirs to transport it to a plastic bottle and sell it back to you at a higher price.
One of the most marked up items in existence is a bottle of water.
Yeah, it's hard to find one that's more marked up. I guess air, now that they're going to do carbon taxes, I guess, air maybe, and water. We're getting down to the fine elements here, Mark. I mean, geez, there's wind and fire here.
Yes, earth, wind, and fire. Now, there was a Canadian broadcaster some decades ago, a very brave man named Gordon Sinclair. He said, why do we fluoridate water? Why do we put something in the water that supposedly will help our teeth that's actually a dangerous chemical if the concentrations are high enough, especially? And why do we wash our cars with it? Why do we shower with it? Why, in all manner of uses of water, why do we put a particular chemical compound in the water that just occasionally might come in contact with our teeth enamel, and yet unavoidably it's in the water that we wash our cars with, it's in the water that we water our gardens and yards with? Why don't we, and this is my add-on to his comments, if somebody wants fluoride water, you can go to the drugstore and other stores and you can buy a container that says fluoridated water. Okay, so anybody that in a market choice as a consumer who wants fluoridated water, I guess I would argue a little bit of free market here. Go ahead and buy it if you want it, but do not put it in the common water supply that everyone taps into, regardless of their medical sensibilities, their medical sensitivities, regardless of what their doctor or dentist may recommend that they do. As Gordon Sinclair pointed out, you can't just put a uniform amount of a chemical compound in the common water supply, because you're drugging the water in essence, and not everybody's tolerances are the same. Okay, in that argument, a lot of people are depressed. Well, put Prozac in the water. Well, their immunity's down. We'll put vitamin C in the water. No, you don't put anything in the water except water. Okay, maybe a little bit of something to keep the E. coli and the organisms down a little, maybe. Maybe there are more natural ways to do that, but they taint the water with fluoridation. Although fluoridation has went down some communities and states are taking it out, and kudos to them. But America still has, I believe, of the first world countries, the highest rate of fluoridation, the highest percentage, if I'm not mistaken. So they do that, which turns you on to bottled water. You say, well, I don't want fluoride and those kind of compounds, which comes from fertilizer manufacturing and aluminum manufacturing. So you turn to bottled water. See, so they create the incentive to turn away from public water and go to bottled water. And then they get you with this huge markup and drain the aquifers, when water is arguably a public utility in its very existence. To allow private corporations to control your water is akin to allowing them to control the monetary policies, the quantity and makeup of money. allowing them to control water is tantamount to that. It's akin to that. So there are some things you just simply cannot turn over to significant private control and profit, and water is one of them. Uh, in Canada, Nestle gets every million liters they pay $3.
For a
$3
million liters.
I believe so. John Devine, the Canadian guy I mentioned, would know. I believe it was just shy of $4 per million liters.
Now think about how much you spend on a bottle of smart water at the Austin airport when you go through there, Mark, for what is that, 12 fluid ounces?
Yeah, you're pretty dumb if you pay it for the smart water. Yeah, these are very extreme injustices that and again, when you see the overall picture, our very important water supplies are pirated. Let's use the right words. Treaties are not enforced. Known technology is not used to mitigate against fire conditions.
And might
And
be used to weaponize us into fire conditions, into fires, into tornadoes, into hurricanes, as far as a lot of people are starting to notice. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so what's done, what's not done, everything that ought to be done is not being done. Things are being done that ought not to be done. And there's an undeniable, what's the word? Direction to it and regularity to it. It's the wrong thing is always being done or not being done.
And
You know what I
one of
mean?
the things about that regularity you mentioned is the regular escalation the further we get into this, because this has been escalating.
Right. So we could be wrong on a couple points of detail. We might have a little overreach in what we're perceiving, but the principle is spot on, right? James Madison talked about you don't let the abuses come to your door. You prevent the abuse by preventing the principle or applying it in whatever case. Madison was a very smart man. Once you deny something in principle, you deny it in reality. Okay. If in principle you know what to do to mitigate against fires, and then based on that principle you carry it out, you won't have any fires of any significance. Guess what? Right?
Yeah.
Is this really so hard? So
Mhm.
we're all supposed to have the fireman mentality. Oh shit, something's burning. Jump in the truck, turn on the siren, and go down there, and somebody might die in the process. A lot of firemen have died, and needlessly.
Yeah. Yeah. And at
And
this point, a lot of people have died needlessly. People in mudslides in North Carolina, people, in floods, people like, again, the people of Lahaina, people in Pacific Palisades, like these things didn't have to happen and they shouldn't have happened. They were avoidable. That much we at least know. That much we at least know. And,
right.
no freaking water in the fire hydrants, okay? There was no underbrush cutting. The power lines weren't turned off. Roads were closed while people were stuck in there. I'm shotgunning between those two events primarily, and this isn't just those. We can go back to the Paradise Fire in California, the Camp Fire in California, and all these. So many of these places also have been slated for. In Lahaina, for example, there was a water rights case in particular that was about to be won and hand the water rights back to the people of the island.
Yeah.
And now that's not happening anymore because there's nobody living there. Nobody's allowed to go in still, pretty much. So, we had that. And then we had Larry Ellison owning 95% of the island right next to Lahaina. We've seen Lahaina on schedules for smart city development. And certainly wouldn't be surprised if the Pacific Palisades aren't on a slate for smart city. Mark and I could tell you that Austin is definitely on the list for a smart city. We even had we even had someone in the chat mention that a bit ago. So what's up with that? What's up with that? How to challenge the falsehood of calling them smart cities, right? Right. And then this one from Joey Poopbag. I bet Austin is the next big city to mysteriously burn down. They got it on the smart city map. See, our viewers know what we're talking about here, Mark.
Yeah. Oh man, I love the viewers' comments. That they really, it's no holds barred, and I love it. And we can't discount. I just talked to Orleen Kurla, a very smart lady, a longtime president of Eagle Forum in California. She gave a presentation January 30th with the surgical arborist Robert Brame, Brame, a professional arborist, investigative arborist, and a mountaineer. He's an avid mountaineer, and he's revealed a lot of apparent and evident deep, dark secrets about the wildfires. The apparent, alleged, we'll say, use of some sort of directed energy technology to some extent seems to be the case. Hence these houses that are burned uniformly, completely and uniformly, and yet trees not only barely burned, if they're burned at all, some of them mysteriously burning from the inside because possibly electrical currents are following the water and moisture that goes into the roots and then goes up into the tree. This is what Orleen was claiming when I talked to her.
Lots of melted cars and stuff like that next to, pieces of paper or trees that are just fine or are looking, abnormal as you just described too.
Right. And the thing is, you have, you have to have trees close enough together in a line or bunches of trees for the fire to have fuel to follow. And you'll see trees that are just scattered, 25 yards apart, 50 yards apart, a couple trees here, a couple trees there, 100 yards apart. There's no place for the fire to have gone to burn all those houses at all, let alone uniformly. Okay. And if you ask questions about this, the Columbo mindset is no longer popular. The Sherlock Holmes inquiry is no longer popular. Sherlock Holmes is a boorish conspiracy theorist now. Columbo is an unwelcome conspiracy theorist. The spirit of Columbo or Sherlock Holmes need not apply. And so
unfortunately,
yeah. So we have ourselves a real mystery here. If it were a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes mystery, it'd be the Great Fire Mystery or something like that, and it'd be another chapter in Sherlock Holmes. And he would easily ask the same questions. Do you, sir, not have the technology to mitigate against such unfortunate events? Repeat, sir, do you not have the technology? And they'd press the guy until they got their answer. And we just don't have enough people in government that are willing to do what needs to be done. All these billionaires and hedge funders, they have the government's congressmen and state reps and state senators, they have their heads on their walls, like a hunter who has deer heads and caribou heads on his wall. They own those politicians, lock, stock, and barrel. And does anyone not have enough pride not to be owned? And now we hear, if I may mention it, Thomas Massey, the few, the proud, the honest congressman, it would appear by all accounts. And, even Donald Trump, the so-called hero, is talking about, Massey has to go. He's asking too many questions. He's voting no where I want him to vote yes. And Massey's, said his vote belongs to the people of his district in Kentucky, not any president. Okay, so he's talking principle. And now he's an enemy of the state, according to even Politico.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't it interesting to watch the MAGA eat its own, or turn on its own once
Right.
you fall off script with the wrong narrative. It's just like, come on, guys. Like, I thought this was about Americans first, right? And it's like, we're asking about that. We're trying to keep accountability on our representatives and our media for that. And the administration, which is doing abysmally in the last few days. In that regard.
You just said something very adroit. You may not realize that was a very adroit observation. Okay, America first, What about Americans first? Okay, because America is just a word for a state. A state, let's just be honest, is an abstraction. Okay. You can say we have a moral state. You can say we have an honorable state, and maybe you're right, but it's still a state. It's only as good as the people running it. It's only as good as the people in it. All right. America first, while it sounds laudable and maybe is in some respects to a degree, it's still an abstraction. Okay. But putting Americans first means the people themselves. And the country is only as good as the people in it. It's only as constitutional as the people that run it. If they're unconstitutional, so is the state. Okay. It's simple.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's see here. Let's clown on the mass media cartel Nimrod.
Let's go a little less serious. Let's throw a few darts. Let's have a little fun. Let's watch the cartel in action.
All right. This is out of, for those of you just listening to this in podcast format after the fact, this is going to be out of ABC 15 Arizona, posted 2 months ago on the YouTubes. Here we go. Let's see what the mainstream has to say about why cloud seeding cannot make or control the weather.
As fires continue to rage across Southern California, misinformation has been spreading online about the use of cloud seeding to fight those fires. In a recently deleted tweet by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, she asked, quote, "Why don't they use geoengineering like cloud seeding to bring rain down on the wildfires in California?" The tweet was flagged by X because the basic principles of how cloud seeding works debunks the statement. To cloud seed, first, you have to have moisture or clouds that are able to produce rain. But during these wildfires, like in California, or if we had some here in Arizona, the air is usually very dry, and these clouds are nowhere in sight. Now, when cloud seeding does take place, a specialized aircraft will fly through these clouds and release substances like silver iodide or even your common table salt. To form a raindrop, you need a surface like dust or a small particle for it to condense on. The goal of cloud seeding is to only help these raindrops form by providing those tiny surfaces. We call those condensation nuclei. However, cloud seeding doesn't actually create the clouds. It simply is just trying to speed up the natural process of raindrop formation by introducing these particles. With growing misinformation online, it may be hard to decipher the facts. So if you have a question about weather, climate, or science in general, ask your ABC 15 meteorologist by emailing us at ask@abc15.
Okay. Ask an authoritative source. If you're confused because of online drifters like Mark Anderson and Hesher, then call ABC. We have the answers for everything. Would you like to know about Gaza? Call us, email us at ABC. Why don't you? We'll set you straight.
Oh, I'm getting a good laugh here. That was just so simplistic, so simpleton. I don't know how to react other than laugh. Okay. The only little thread of truth, and it's only alleged truth in that, is maybe in the midst of the fire, right during the fire, you might have more trouble. But, you could, number one, you could try cloud seeding downrange. Weather does move through the sky. Clouds and weather patterns are literally described as rivers in the sky. That's basically what they are. Okay. Guess what? They move. Mr. Hobbs there, the meteorologist, who are about as credible as economists these days, they move, Mr. Hobbs. The weather patterns move. That's a funny thing, isn't it? Anyway, as I said earlier, they can predict the weather conditions, whether you're going to have a thunderstorm in a couple of weeks, with pretty good accuracy. Sometimes the accuracy is almost uncanny, sometimes even suspicious. I digress, lest I become another enemy of the state. But the fact of the matter is they know enough about future weather to mitigate against a future drought. You don't have to wait until the wildfire's going, like Mr. Nimrod was talking about, where, yes, you might have a little bit harder time. Maybe you won't succeed, but that's not what I'm talking about, is it? And he studiously avoids that dimension of the issue. But all you got to do is call him, and they'll have all the answers. And I'm really glad. I'd like to know whether I'm ever going to be a billionaire. Maybe they can tell me that too. And then I can join the billionaires club, the brainiacs. I have money, you're not. I'm rich, you aren't. Therefore I'm smart and you're not. I guess that's how it works. You own a hedge fund or a private equity fund, and suddenly you're Sir Isaac Newton.
Yeah. Well, I will give him credit, or whoever posted this video credit, because at least they titled it correctly. Okay. It should actually, I will add one addition they could have done to it, but the actual title is um, uh, right there. Why cloud seeding cannot make or control the weather. Okay, all right. I like that, there be at least being specific about the cloud seeding part, but the cloud seeding part is technology from decades and decades ago. That process he's describing right there is literally probably as old as I am, if not older, and has come a very, very long way. And there's a lot of disclosure and research about this out there available. And now one of the new threads I'm seeing people pull on is that there are actually additives going into your standard jet fuel too. So not only do you have these airplanes that make these mysterious patterns, they certainly aren't passenger jets, because I see them going straight up, I see them going straight down, and I've never seen anyone get off, American Airlines 1042 and go, wow, that was neat when we went straight up and straight down, and afterward,
and flew in a circle and went back to where we came from.
right? And you know what else is an old technology, Mark, is HARP, the HARP array that we used to have up there, and I think it was in Alaska. It was this giant array of antennas, and what they would do with this thing, to my understanding, is they would use it to blast electromagnetic energy into the sky, and they could ionize certain parts of the sky,
Right.
and they could ionize parts of weather fronts, and then do stuff to it with cloud seeding and other things. And that was a whole range of technology that, guess what, is now also outdated. They closed that down. They've miniaturized it. From what I can tell, it's probably available. If it's miniaturized, it's available at high altitudes, whether that's from an airplane or maybe even a satellite mount. So many things in technology have been miniaturized and put on little balls on the front of airplanes, or things coming out of airplanes, or even on satellites. And other countries have this technology too. India has this. Saudi Arabia has this, as we pointed out. There are multiple countries that have, state and corporate versions of these kind of, technological devices that can do things by ionizing the lower atmosphere and the upper atmosphere. And that's all been miniaturized, and they kind of gave us HARP near the end of its life cycle. They're like, yeah, this is kind of what we do with this thing. It's cool. We're going to shut it down though, so don't worry about it anymore. So
yeah,
they totally
I would
did all that.
I would wonder if it was really shut down. Saying it doesn't make it so. They might have moved it. They might have revamped it. There's also high altitude balloons, and once in a while, one of them will fall to the ground in a most unopportune place. And I'll mention too that Texas has been quite dry. Okay, Boca Chica and SpaceX is along the water. It's pretty close, but this is the time of year that Texas is notoriously very dry. But there isn't a rocket that Elon how would I say this? He's never prevented from launching one failed rocket after another. Oops, another one blew up over the Gulf of America, the last one, I believe, a bunch of debris came down in Florida on land. Now, maybe they're not as dry as here, but I would think that SpaceX should be heavily regulated during the driest time of year for Texas, blasting off rockets that are having a tendency to blow up every time they're launched. Supposedly they can bring this booster back to the ground, which always looks a little fuzzy to me, a little suspicious. Putting that aside, most of what goes up blows up.
I like that. We should put that up. We should make our own SpaceX t-shirt that says that. What goes up blows up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it's this pass that the billionaire class gets, this rarefied, anointed aura put around a billionaire. I'm a billionaire. I am the guru. I am the oracle. I know all. I see all. My God, I can tell you everything. I have an IQ of 15,000. I mean, really? From Bill Gates blocking the sun because that's just what you do, and all these people, the Oracle guy that met with Trump about, and then Sam Altman, Bilderberger, OpenAI was there talking about Lord knows what with OpenAI, and just some sort of pipe dream.
Project
Another way,
Stargate, bro. We need Project Stargate, bro, so bad. We need $500 billion for Project Stargate. As I step over this fentanyl zombie, getting calls about 45-year-olds and 50-year-olds dying mysteriously of turbo cancers. We need Project Stargate, bro. We gotta get more jabs into people. We gotta change you. We want to change you for the better. Look how much better everything is when you let the oligarchs and the technocrats change you. We want to rewrite your very DNA. Never mind the first people we tried to give it to now have turbo cancer, but we're going to fix your weather. We're going to blot out the sun. All this. We need Project Stargate so bad.
Exactly. What a sci-fi novel that would make, your DNA will be modified. We will do what we need to do. We our will is your will. And, you will not resist. And, as if that's the automatic remedy, in other words, it couldn't be, let's just get the glyphosate out of the food, the unhealthy outgrowth of Monsanto's grow up.
Water in the hydrants. I don't know.
Yeah, putting water in hydrants. There we go.
Poison
Taking the
house
glyphosate out of oatmeal and out of wheat bread. The Roundup. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Not using Roundup. A bunch of dead Army veterans. That eat bad diets and consume these things and die of Gulf War syndrome. Well, if we had only modified their DNA, they could have taken all the depleted uranium they wanted and they would have never been affected, right? Oh, but let's leave the depleted uranium munitions in the Army arsenals. Let's turn any place they're used into radioactive wastelands. Let's make sure we do that. Oh, it affects our own soldiers. Well, they're just grunts, collateral damage.
Hey, uranium, it's safe and effective, folks. Don't forget, like a lot of other things you've been told, we're safe, effective, and necessary.
But digressing, I mean, as we wind up today, and I think we can probably just about leave it where we're at. Known things that are simple and could at least be marginally effective, and we could constantly work at it till we get better, like cloud seeding, been around since the 1930s or 40s, not being openly utilized, and there's no evidence they're being utilized for the public good. Other weather modification technologies that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration knows good and well exist because they prohibit them without a license. Otherwise, you pay a $10,000 fine. Anything that is being used is apparently being used for the wrong things. What could be used for good is apparently not being used for good. And you've just got an overall array of unenforced treaties. What I read was that even during the wildfires, Nestle didn't even receive an order to even reduce their aquifer access during the worst part of the California wildfires. Australia had some really bad wildfires and related events only a few years ago. To the best of my knowledge, the water bottlers and the soda pop bottlers were not told to tone down their water extraction from the aquifers, not even by one drop. These people are just allowed to do what they want, carte blanche. In a real society, if you had water bottlers and soft drink bottlers in a state being racked by drought and wildfires, you would have people with guns go to those extraction plants and say, you are going to cut it in half or more right now, or we're shutting you down completely. We have guns, you don't. We're talking right now. This is an executive order. That's how it would work.
Yeah, man. And again, back to Lahaina, that's basically where they were at, except without having to go that far. I mean, they were there with legal means. They were really about to make a big improvement in their lives and rectify a big injustice from big government and corrupt state government. And not only did they not get that, but they got their livelihoods burned down. They got their best tourist location burned down. They got shut out of there. They got told they were going to get arrested if they tried to go in there, try to find if any of their house survived, if their safe is survived the fire, whatever. Look for a lost pet. Look for a potentially dead relative. They're not letting people in there to do that. They wouldn't let you fly a drone over it. I mean, this was like crazy, like COVIDian style
Yes.
stuff that we saw going on there. And they put these giant black tarps up around the whole city so nobody could see in, nobody could go overhead, nobody can rebuild their business, nobody's rebuilt their home. And there's talks about maybe them not letting that happen. So
Right. So you have criminal negligence and manslaughter of some sort at least in those cases.
yeah.
So let me get one thing straight before we sign out here and summarize. Friday night, I saw those signs over the highway, extreme wildfire warning. Okay. Am I correct in saying that the fires raging across Texas, including one twice the size of Manhattan, started the next day?
Well, that's a really good question. I was thinking about that, and the problem with this update that we're going from here is we need to look into each of those to see when it started. It's possible because this yes, if all these started at or around the time we talked, that is pretty amazing because we were actually warned a week earlier to expect this back when we had that heavy wind and dust storm on a Monday, 1 or 2 Mondays ago. And this time it actually happened or was starting to happen within, moments of our conversation or even, by the time we woke up the next day. Because this update is March 16 and the alert that we got was March 15. So, it is pretty crazy. And everybody, that's why Mark and I are here on a Sunday night. We had that conversation yesterday, and we wanted to get out ahead of this before any fires got out because we wanted to just point out that there might be missing context when things like this are out there, and that it's okay to have a conversation like this. And most importantly, the big question was, are we seeing revelation of the method, predictive programming, something like that? Does someone know something we don't know? But there's this weird ritual humiliation that must happen where not only do they not seed the clouds to rain and avoid a fire, but they seed your brain. They cloud seed your brain with predictive programming.
Yes, and the Friday evening that I saw those signs over the highways in deep South Texas was the 14th, Friday, March 14th. So by the 15th, you saw that one document, and by 15/16, today being the 16th, we're seeing looks like a couple of dozen fires across Texas, including one over 20,000 acres.
Yep.
So imagine if you knew a military attack was coming against your country, something deliberate and damaging. Okay, you would make preparations. You would do things to mitigate against the damage that attack might inflict. Now, if you know the conditions are coming a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that might be the perfect storm for wildfires, regardless of something more sinister like, directed energy weapons, things like that. Let's just leave that out of the conversation just for the sake of it. And you don't mitigate against that, then that's akin to knowing an enemy attack is coming and taking no action whatsoever. Just because the so-called random acts of nature may be involved to some extent does not diminish the responsibility of public officials to proactively prepare.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And these are simple things that we've done for decades in this country. Clean the brush, turn the grid off after the winds get to 75 miles an hour, keep water in the fire hydrants, real
Right.
simple stuff.
And Coca-Cola and Nestle has to shut off the bottling.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's fix that. No kidding. All right, Mark, let me throw just a couple comments up before we go here. We've already had a couple good ones. Here's Joey Poopbag again. I'm building my next house out of concrete underground. Yeah, we don't blame you.
Oh, you remind. Thank you, Joey Poopbag. I got to get one more brief dimension in here. David South ran the Monolithic Dome Institute, that place about an hour south of Dallas, where you'd see those strange domes. One looked like a caterpillar, you might recall, along 35.
Yeah.
Okay, David South passed away a few years ago. He was a brilliant Christian man, very, very dedicated to building the modern equivalent of dome-like structures that go back to antiquity because they last the longest. Okay, he went to Indonesia where weather, I believe flooding and storming was particularly terrible, probably a typhoon. And he replaced the community that got destroyed with what's known as the monolithic dome. Okay, the monolithic dome is built out of a kind of man-made concrete with rebar in it. They replaced the metal rebar with basalt so it wouldn't rust, so it wouldn't corrode. I'm not promoting the company, it's just the technology. Okay, a gym was built in the town of Ennis near Italy, Texas, which is not far from Waxahachie. And that gym is built to last 500 years. It will last 500 years. It's built with the old dome technology, not the stick, the 2x4s put together that we have prevalent now, which is actually quite behind the times, quite what's the word, out of step. It's not an advanced technology. Stick built homes are not progress. Okay, you might build a better stick built home, you might have more innovation, but a stick built home is a stick built home. The cathedrals of antiquity still stand because they were built with a different approach. Okay, and the monolithic dome is based on that principle. There was a particularly bad tornadoes in Missouri around Joplin, you might recall, maybe 12, 15 years ago. And I believe it was in Missouri or the neighboring state of Oklahoma, but the aftermath of the tornado, there was an aerial photograph, and one home that survived was a monolithic dome, completely intact.
Wow.
Now, David South took a sojourn, drove all the way up to Joplin, Missouri, and gave a presentation. And his presentations were very good on monolithic domes. And he was met with, thank you, Mr. South. That was very interesting, but no thanks. And so what did Joplin do? It rebuilt after being totally destroyed by a probably F4 or F5 tornado. It rebuilt the same stick homes that were destroyed before, because that's what you do, right?
Uh-oh.
So even though he carried out an almost miracle in Indonesia and gave that community something that would survive what Mother Nature will throw at it in the place of what was destroyed, even though he had that and all sorts of other things on his resume, the people in and around Joplin were not interested.
Well. Here we go again with planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence of your own freaking home or business, I guess. Heaven forbid we have to create a new industry or, disrupt another industry to make people safer.
And I went in that gymnasium in, I think it's Ennis near Italy, and there were walls in there, and Mr. South walked me and my wife Angie around the whole thing. And it saved so much energy by the nature of the man-made concrete, which is called shotcrete. It saved so much energy that in 20 years, the amount of money it saved was enough to build an exact replica of the gym floor of the Boston Celtics in a K through 12 school building in that
I bet those aren't cheap.
Right. And the walls in there were only for functional walls. Like you got to go in the locker room, so you got to have a wall, but no supportive walls were needed whatsoever in the entire structure.
Yeah, because the distribution of weight is just so ideal, from peak to ground.
Right. And even the local building inspectors gave it a lifespan of 500 years.
Well, why would we want anything like that? Can you have windows in there? Is that what the
Yeah,
problem?
yeah. People do have windows, and
Okay.
sometimes they can get blown out by a tornado. But there was also a monolithic dome church and community building over in Mississippi or Alabama, somewhere over that way. There was a really bad tornado, and when the authorities got there, they took entire cars or parts of cars off the top of the church, and all it was some superficial damage.
Oh my gosh.
Entire tree trunks.
Wow.
The inside completely intact.
Wow.
Again,
Crazy.
technology. If you have a high tornado area, which is right now as we're speaking, some close to 40 people have been killed in Tornado Alley and in and around Oklahoma, etc., Kansas.
We had a tornado touchdown not but 2 miles away from our friend Mystical Pharaoh just yesterday.
Well, there you go. But at least in the main tornado alley areas, which include parts of Nebraska, and I was involved in one of those once. I was in Nebraska when some tornadoes came really close. It's scary. It's not a pleasant thing. So the thing is those areas could have a prevalence of this kind of construction, and we have to ask why they don't. Okay.
Yeah.
Once again, what are we doing here? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, just a couple more quick comments and we'll close out here, Mark. Cinzio says, as a non-US citizen, I was pretty shocked at how politicized water management is in the US. Yeah, right?
It's bad.
Understandably. Yeah. Let's see here. And again, follows up with, I don't think our creator had bureaucracy and corruption in mind for water back in the day. Yeah.
There you go.
And then Slow Boy again, building cardboard McMansions on speculation about destroying the aquifers. Brutal comment.
Cardboard McMansions. The average house, I'm sorry to say, the average home is a cardboard McMansion if Mother Nature or the deep state or some illicit combination thereof decides to throw their weight around.
Right. Yeah. And that was before we talked about the domes there. That comment came in. So that was fortuitous and timely. Again, Slow Boy here. Mexican water has a crap ton of pollution in it, so who would even want it?
Now that's a good point. In so much as I don't know the nature of the water. There's the water treaty. Where does the water come from? Some of it, I think I read, was Mexico is more mountainous than you think it is. Some of it was mountain runoff, but that doesn't account for all of it, I don't believe. So, the quality of the water is always a concern. Yes.
Yeah. Cinzio followed up. California water management is the most corrupt that I've studied so far. Yeah, I agree. I brought this up one of the last times we were talking about this, and I've brought it up a whole bunch of times. There is a great article by F. William Engdahl about California water policies and the water crisis related to like the 2018-ish drought. And it's gone. It is gone since the last time. I always put it on the show pages and have it at hand, but the site is no longer responding. So I'm a little concerned, but if you really look deep enough on the internet, you can probably find it reposted or in the Wayback Machine or something. F. William Engdahl, or just get his books. If you don't have them, you should have them anyways. But yeah, and that would really drive that point home, Cinzio.
Well, I'll end with this. Ron Avery and I, and you've heard this before, but I want the audience to hear it in this context. Ron Avery and I went to an American Meteorological Association conference in early 2018 in Austin, and they tried to kick us out. Now, that's really funny. Who, pray tell, who in the hell gets kicked out of a water conference, and why would you be kicked out of a weather conference? And here's the answer. They had a exhibit floor, and then they had breakout sessions and speeches by meteorologists and academics and some weather journalists in all these different rooms in this convention center. And Ron and I had watched several of the presentations and breakout sessions, and they talked routinely about weather modification, especially cloud seeding, but other things too, a little bit. And they talked about how this university did this experiment, and I'm this meteorologist with channel whatever, and I got on the plane and I flew along with these academics, and they did the spraying. And later on, what I asked them was, but you guys, when you go on the air, you don't tell the public that if it rains an unusual amount or unexpectedly over in this region, that wasn't just the forces of nature, that there was human intervention involved. And he just sort of deflected the question. But the obvious reality was that if there's an unusual amount of rain, like a monsoon practically, that might cause flooding, what if some farmer is flooded out or somebody drowns in a flood that was caused by irresponsible or unusually heavy cloud seeding, maybe without enough forethought, maybe without the right oversight, and it went awry and too much rain came down? Shouldn't they have to disclose when a given area has been cloud seeded and people in that area might expect a little more rain than usual? And I kept getting stonewalled.
No surprise there. I mean, there was, I can't bring the article up right now, but there was it was like 2 years ago, I think, there was like a award-winning climate scientist, who was going to be speaking at this big climate conference, and he made some comments, in a media appearance before that, saying that the climate hysteria is based on pseudoscience. And I mean, this guy's, like, if I recall, like a Nobel laureate or something like that, highly decorated, highly respected in the field, and then just completely canceled from this big speaking event. It's like this, they will eat their own. They will gladly cannibalize their own expert if they're brave or wise enough, or both.
Yeah, a good political cartoon would be the former head of the AMA is now on a rotisserie, and the rest of the meteorologists are going to eat him for lunch.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I remember is Ron Avery and I had the notebook, he had the video camera. After we heard all the speeches, several of which were admitting to weather modification, especially cloud seeding, we went to the exhibit hall, and even the company that makes the ball jars that you can pickles in is a military contractor. And there were dozens of military contractors with their pamphlets on the tables and their presentations and their little screen with the video going about how they can provide weather prediction and other weather services, because won't the military have an advantage if they know more about the weather? So all the usual suspects were there. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, the Coast Guard, in collaboration with companies, including known military contractors that would give them better weather intel with which to fight our enemies. China, oh my gosh, here comes China again, our perpetual foe. So there you go. And so when we were asking fairly softball questions, and there weren't a lot of other people on the exhibit floor at that time, most of them were in the speaking sessions, a guy came up to us and asked us to leave. And I said, well, and we had our press badges. We're actually registered press. And he hesitated for a minute, and he still tried to ask us to leave. And I asked him why. And he finally said, you guys are, bothering the people on the floor. You're asking too many questions. And my eyeballs were no further than this far away from his. And I just looked at him straight in and said, there is no way in hell we're leaving here. Now get the hell out of my way. And he backed down.
Yeah. Micro tyrant. Sorry, get out of my face.
Yeah.
Well, the journalist asked a couple questions that made people uncomfortable. That whole thing you just described, to me, that sounds like almost akin to insider trading or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds nasty. It sounds it doesn't sound like anything that benefits the American people. It sounds like stuff that benefits the military-industrial complex and the corporate complex and the government and media grifters that want to commit psychological operations and promote hysteria amongst everybody. And gosh darn it, if there is missing context to these weather event fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, other anomalies that we have seen, God damn it, we want to know, because that's the whole missing context. That's the part you're not allowed to say. That's the part you're not allowed to ask about. So be your inner Columbo and just admit to yourself that if there's missing context here, technology, corporate, whatever it is, this conversation cannot continue as though I'm crazy for asking for that piece of context, because anything that we dive off of without that context being rock solid and agreeable on all sides of that conversation is potentially just a lollygag into fake and gay reality.
And let's conclude with this. You mentioned earlier, and that was very helpful off the air, that the second Twister movie, the first one being more about they wanted to send these little devices up into the tornado to learn how it works. But the second one was to try and kind of turn off the tornado. Well, there's a patent. If you want to show it, you can. If not, you can put it in the show notes or both. There's a patent. I don't know the status of it, and I don't happen to know yet if this method of interrupting a tornado, there's the patent information, whether it's been tested much, whether it's been used, whether it's become off-the-shelf technology, I don't know. But what I did find out from reading on it is it involves liquid nitrogen, which of course is one of the coldest substances there is. And in Alaska, there's essentially no tornadoes. Consistent cold weather makes tornadoes essentially impossible. So to put something extremely cold into the vortex evidently will turn them down, if not off. And this is a patent, and how real this is, I don't know. But I would encourage listeners, live and archive, whatever, be your inner Columbo, be your inner Sherlock Holmes, and take off with this, because it's very possible, maybe we can even use the word probable, that tornadoes once sighted could be turned off, and they're not doing it.
Yeah. I mean, if these things are possible, we should know. And if you can turn them off, can you turn them on? Right. And if you can turn them off, why do they not all just get turned off? And if you can turn them on, who, how, where, when, and to what ends are they being turned on? Mark, I have one more comment I got to show you here. Someone dropped in. This is Silvertail 1947. Yes, NSW Dun Creek. I believe that means New South Wales. Fire Bateman's Bay. They turned off our water and demanded we leave. Those who stayed saved lots of houses. So there's a lot of that going on too in almost all of these situations. I mean, you get into what FEMA was doing in Lahaina and how FEMA behaved in North Carolina. I mean, that was crazy. Some of the stuff they did. They came in and set up this giant military base and, started telling people what they can and can't do, and this goes all the way back to that big hurricane that hit Louisiana back when.
New Orleans in 2005.
Right. Like a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of just like pop-up authoritarianism and, preying on people's worst fears and not giving people the option to come and go as they see fit and keep them well informed so they can make smart decisions about that. None of that.
Civilian disarmament too.
Yeah. Let's not forget that. No doubt.
Okay. Well, there you go. I think that's a pretty good chunk of what could be done that isn't being done, and what is being done that ought not to be done. And the fact that there are a lot of, among the little bit of unknowns we have, there's a lot of knowns, a lot of things we know, and we can see very clearly that they're not being applied much, if at all. And if they are being applied, why don't we hear about it? And if they're not being applied, why aren't they? And so what we end up with is a governor or a president will fly over another disaster zone, declare it a disaster. Here comes FEMA. roll out the FEMA trucks, roll out the FEMA trailers, roll out the tax dollars. The tiresome thing just keeps going on and on and on. Oh, yeah, that's a disaster. Wow, every house burned down. Mr. Governor, do you really think it's a disaster? Wow, that's really brilliant of you. Such insight.
Yeah. Yeah. Karen Bass, you're lucky we're closing this down. I got words for you too. We could single out a couple of these mayors as well, some governors. There's just so many rabbit holes to go down, Mark. But let's call it a show here. I want to thank everybody for joining us on these live streams. We're on Rumble and YouTube tonight. Thank you, and Rumble and YouTube, for having us. Rockfin, what happened? Rockfin, I don't know where you went and where all our followers went, but there seems to be a persistent problem there with Rockfin. So if you're one of our Rockfin viewers, do us a favor and switch over to Rumble as your primary, or YouTube. YouTube seems to be humming along pretty well, but I'd still go Rumble as primary, YouTube as backup. We'll get back on X real quick here. Thanks to a donation from a listener, we're able to restore our premium X account. So if you want to jump in and help out, we have support link at alternatecurrentradio.com. We do need your support. This is hard work. Mark and I are taking time away from our families on a Sunday night so that we can have this conversation, and hopefully you'll share it around and find other people that can benefit from it. So Mark, tell people where they can find you real quick before we go.
UK column every Friday. It's 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern. Although for one more day or one more Friday, it's actually 8 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Eastern because of the shifting times in the spring. That's the main place right now. I still do a radio show for republicbroadcasting.org every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. Central, 2 to 3 Eastern. And on the next UK column, or maybe at the latest, the one after that, I'm going to have still frames, and I should have video footage from an all-important presentation on the California fires that happened back on January 30th. Kudos to Free Laser for being the cameraman for me, him and an assistant. They went as my correspondents to Central California, not too far from Sacramento, to cover this event, where Orleen Kurla, the author and Eagle Forum president in California, she was one of the speakers. Robert Brame, the investigative arborist and mountain climber, he was another one of the speakers. And so I'm going to have a pretty good expose there pretty soon in UK column. It might carry over on more than one broadcast, and it'll probably become an interview and or an article on the ukcolumn.org website. So lots going on with the weather right now, and digging down into this, Hesh.
All right. Awesome. Man, investigative arborist. I didn't know this was a profession. I'm in the wrong business. That sounds absolutely fun and fascinating. But that's really cool, Mark. So we'll see you at ukcolumn.org. And of course, Republic Broadcast Network, and here at Alternate Current Radio in the Boiler Room. Great having you tonight, Mark. Really appreciate the conversation. We'll keep an eye on this. Who knows? There may be an update required. We still have fires burning here, and we still have burning questions that we would like answered by mainstream media and corporate and military and politics.
It might be a cliche, but that's a good title for tonight's show, Burning Questions. All right. Thanks, Ash. I wanted to get ahead of this, although the fires beat us to it.
Yeah, I know. We thought we had 24 hours to put this conversation together, but apparently we should have just streamed our phone call.
Yeah, we didn't move fast enough. Isn't that interesting? As fast as we moved, it still wasn't fast enough.
Hey, they say you can't outrun fire, especially in high winds.
The fire of tyranny, too. Okay. Thanks a lot, Hash.
All right. There goes Mark Anderson. Thank you, Truth Hound, and thank you for being here with us. We'll see you again on Thursday for another Boiler Room. If you missed Sunday Wire today, it's up on our website, alternatecurrentradio.com, and it's also over at 21stcenturywire.com, of course. We'll see you next time.
That's it. Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.